October 15th, 2023. My wife stood up at our anniversary dinner, wine glass raised, and announced to our entire family that she was the one who really ran things in our marriage, that I was just along for the ride. Everyone laughed, but what happened next made the whole table go silent. Want to know how I exposed the truth without saying a single word? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Derek Hartwell, and I've been married to my wife, Vanessa, for 12 years. 12 years that on the surface looked picture perfect to everyone who knew us. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs of Minneapolis. 2 kids, Emma, who's 10, and Lucas, who's 7. And from the outside, we were the definition of success. But behind closed doors, things were very different. Vanessa had always been strong-willed. That's one of the things I loved about her when we first met at a charity gala back in 2011. She was confident, ambitious, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. I was working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm, and she was climbing the corporate ladder at a marketing agency. We clicked immediately, and within 2 years we were married. The early years were good. We supported each other's careers, traveled together, and built a life that felt balanced. But somewhere around year 5, things started to shift. Vanessa's career took off. She became the director of her department, then VP of marketing. The promotions came with longer hours, more stress, and a personality change I didn't see coming. She started making decisions without consulting me. Big decisions, like when she decided we were moving to a bigger house without asking my opinion, or when she enrolled Emma in an expensive private school that stretched our budget thin, even though we'd agreed on public school. Every time I tried to discuss it, she'd wave me off with the same line, "I've got this under control, Derek. Trust me." And I did trust her. Maybe too much. The thing is, I'm not a confrontational person. I've never been the type to pick fights or demand my way. I believed in compromise, in working through issues calmly. But Vanessa interpreted my patience as weakness. Over time, she stopped asking for my input altogether. She made financial decisions, parenting choices, even social plans, without including me in the conversation. Our friends started to notice. At gatherings, Vanessa would casually mention how she handled everything at home. She'd joke about how I was lucky to have her keeping things organized. People would laugh, and I'd force a smile, but inside, it stung. I wasn't some incompetent husband who couldn't manage his own life. I worked hard, contributed financially, and was an active father to our kids. But Vanessa had crafted this narrative where she was the mastermind and I was just there. The real breaking point came about 3 months before our 12th anniversary. Vanessa had been planning this big anniversary dinner for weeks. She wanted to invite both our families. Her parents, my parents, her sister Monica and her husband, my brother Ryan and his wife, everyone. It was supposed to be this grand celebration at the Riverside, an upscale restaurant downtown that overlooked the Mississippi River. I thought it was a nice idea. A chance to bring everyone together, celebrate our marriage, and maybe, just maybe, reconnect as a couple. We'd been so distant lately, like 2 roommates sharing a house rather than partners sharing a life. The weeks leading up to the dinner were tense. Vanessa was stressed with work, snapping at me over minor things like leaving dishes in the sink or forgetting to pick up dry cleaning. I tried to help with the dinner planning, offering to handle the reservations or coordinate with the restaurant, but she shut me down every time. "I've already taken care of it," she'd say, barely looking up from her laptop. "You don't need to worry about it." So I didn't. I focused on work, spent time with the kids, and tried to stay out of her way. The day of the anniversary dinner arrived, October 15th, 2023. It was a Sunday evening, and the weather was perfect. Clear skies, cool autumn air, the kind of night that makes you grateful to live in Minnesota. I put on my best suit, a navy blue one that Vanessa had bought me years ago, and helped the kids get ready. Emma wore a pretty floral dress, and Lucas complained about having to wear a tie, but we managed. Vanessa came downstairs looking stunning in a black cocktail dress, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She smiled at me, a rare, genuine smile, and for a moment I felt hopeful. "You clean up nice," she said, adjusting my tie. "So do you," I replied, meaning it. We drove to the riverside in relative silence, the kids chattering in the back seat about seeing their grandparents. When we arrived, the restaurant was already buzzing with early evening diners. The host led us to a private dining room Vanessa had reserved, a beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, elegant lighting, and a long table set for 12. Our families started arriving shortly after. My parents, Robert and Linda Hartwell, were first. They're good people. Dad's a retired electrician. Mum worked as a school librarian for 30 years. They've always been supportive, even when they didn't fully understand my choices. Then came Vanessa's parents, Gregory and Patricia Monroe. Gregory is a successful real estate developer, and Patricia is a former model-turned-interior designer. They're wealthy, polished, and have always had high expectations for Vanessa. I've never quite measured up in their eyes, but I've learned to live with it. My brother Ryan arrived with his wife, Kelly. Ryan's a high school teacher, laid back and easygoing. Kelly's a nurse. They're one of those couples who genuinely seem happy, and I've always admired that about them. Vanessa's sister Monica came last with her husband, Brad. Monica is a lawyer, sharp as a tack, and Brad works in tech. They're competitive in everything they do, always trying to one-up each other and everyone else. Once everyone was settled, drinks were ordered, appetizers served, and the conversation flowed easily. People caught up on work, the kids' school activities, upcoming holidays. It felt warm and familiar, and I started to relax. That's when Vanessa stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a knife, drawing everyone's attention. The table fell silent, all eyes on her. "I just want to take a moment," she began, her voice confident and clear, "to thank everyone for being here tonight. Derek and I have been married for 12 incredible years, and I couldn't be prouder of what we've built together." People smiled, nodding along. I smiled too, unsure where this was going. "But I have to be honest," Vanessa continued, a playful smirk crossing her face. "The reason we've made it this far is because I've learned to take charge. Derek's a wonderful man, don't get me wrong, but let's be real, I'm the one who really runs things in this marriage." There was a ripple of laughter around the table. Her father chuckled, her sister grinned. Even my own mother smiled awkwardly. My stomach dropped. "Derek's great at going along with things," Vanessa went on, clearly enjoying herself now. "He lets me make the big decisions, handle the finances, manage the household. Honestly, I think he's just happy to have someone taking care of everything for him." More laughter. Louder this time. I felt my face flush, my hands clenched under the table. I glanced around. My dad looked uncomfortable. Ryan was staring at his plate. But most people were still smiling, treating it like a harmless joke. But it wasn't harmless. "Not to me," Vanessa raised her glass. "So, here's to 12 more years of me keeping this ship sailing smoothly." Everyone raised their glasses and toasted. I raised mine too, mechanically, but inside, something had shifted. I'd reached my limit. For years, I'd let her control the narrative. I'd stayed quiet, avoided conflict, told myself it didn't matter what people thought. But sitting there, humiliated in front of both our families, I realized something crucial. It was time to show everyone the truth. Dinner continued as if nothing had happened. Appetizers turned into entrees, wine glasses were refilled, and conversations picked back up. But I was no longer present in the moment. My mind was racing, calculating, processing everything that had just occurred. I watched Vanessa as she laughed with her sister, completely unbothered by what she'd just said. To her, it was probably nothing more than a funny anecdote, a light-hearted joke to entertain the crowd. But to me, it was the culmination of years of being diminished, overlooked, and treated like a supporting character in my own life. My brother Ryan leaned over and whispered, "You good, man?" I nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't going to pretend to be. The thing about being underestimated is that people stop paying attention to what you're actually doing. Vanessa had been so focused on building her image as the competent, in-control wife that she'd completely missed what I'd been managing behind the scenes for the past several years. See, Vanessa's claim that she handled the finances wasn't exactly true. She handled her own income and made big purchasing decisions, sure, but I was the one who actually managed our accounts. I paid the bills, monitored our investments, tracked our spending, and made sure we stayed financially stable. She just never bothered to ask about the details, and over the last 3 years, I'd been doing something she had no idea about. I'd been preparing for this exact moment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It started small. About 3 years ago, after one particularly nasty argument where Vanessa told me I contributed nothing of value to our household decisions, I opened a separate savings account. Nothing dramatic, just a personal account where I started depositing a portion of my paychecks. Money that was legally mine, earned from my job, set aside for emergency purposes. At first, it was just a few $100s a month. Then as my income increased and I got promoted to senior analyst, I started saving more. I also began documenting everything. Every financial decision Vanessa made without consulting me, every major purchase she initiated, every time she dismissed my concerns about our budget. I kept spreadsheets. I saved emails. I documented conversations in a private journal I kept on my laptop. Not because I was planning to leave her. Honestly, I wasn't. I loved Vanessa despite everything. But I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't the incompetent, passive husband she made me out to be. Proof that would protect me if things ever fell apart. Tonight, sitting at that anniversary dinner, listening to her brag about how she controlled everything, I realized things had already fallen apart. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. As the main course was served, grilled salmon for most of the table, steak for a few others, Vanessa's father, Gregory, turned his attention to me. "So, Derek," he said, his tone friendly but condescending in that way wealthy people often are, "how's work treating you these days?" Still crunching numbers. I cut into my salmon, keeping my voice even. "Actually, things are going really well. I was promoted to Vice President of Financial Strategy about 6 months ago." There was a pause. Vanessa's head snapped toward me, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "Wait, what?" she said, her eyes narrowing. "You never told me that." I met her gaze calmly. "I mentioned it back in April. You were on a conference call when I got home, so I told you later that evening. You said, 'That's great, we'll talk about it later,' and then we never did." Her face flushed slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, congratulations," she said, her tone clipped. "I've been so busy with my own projects I must have forgotten." Gregory raised his glass. "VP at your age? That's impressive, Derek. Good for you." I nodded my thanks, taking a sip of water. Across the table, Ryan was watching me with a curious expression, like he was seeing me differently for the first time. My mother chimed in, bless her heart. "Derek's always been so humble about his accomplishments." "He doesn't like to brag." "Clearly," Monica said with a smirk. "And like some people," she was looking at Vanessa, but Vanessa didn't catch the jab. She was too busy staring at me, trying to figure out what had just happened. For years I'd been quiet, agreeable, and non-confrontational. But something in my tone, in the way I'd corrected her, had shifted the energy at the table. The conversation moved on, but I could feel Vanessa's eyes on me throughout the rest of dinner. She was suspicious now, trying to piece together what she'd missed. Dessert arrived, a beautiful tiered cake the restaurant had prepared, decorated with delicate sugar flowers, and our names written in elegant script. Everyone sang a slightly off-key version of Happy Anniversary, and Vanessa and I cut the cake together, smiling for the photos her sister was taking, but the tension between us was palpable. After cake, as coffee was being served, Vanessa's mother, Patricia, decided to stir the pot. "Vanessa, darling," she said, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness, "you mentioned you've been handling all the finances. That must be exhausting with your work schedule. How do you manage it all?" Vanessa straightened in her chair, clearly pleased to have the spotlight again. Honestly, it's not that hard once you have a system. I handle all our investments, manage our portfolio, and make sure we're maximizing our returns. Derek helps with some of the day-to-day stuff, but I oversee the big picture. I took a slow sip of my coffee, saying nothing. Ryan's wife, Kelly, who'd been quiet most of the evening, spoke up. That's impressive. What kind of returns have you been seeing? We've been thinking about diversifying our own investments. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Oh, we've done very well. Our portfolio has grown significantly over the past few years. I made some smart moves in tech stocks and real estate. I set my coffee cup down gently, the clink against the saucer drawing attention. Actually, I said quietly, our primary investment portfolio is up about 18% over the last 3 years, which is solid, but not exceptional given the market conditions. The real growth has been in the diversified index funds and municipal bonds I shifted us into back in 2021. Dead silence. Vanessa's smile froze on her face. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app and turned the screen toward her. Not so anyone else could see, just her. Our Vanguard account, the one I've been managing since we opened it 9 years ago. You set up the initial investment, but I've been handling the rebalancing, contributions, and strategic adjustments since then. Her face went pale. The tech stocks you're referring to, I continued. My voice still calm and measured. Those are in your personal trading account, which is separate from our joint retirement and investment accounts. Your personal account is actually down about 12% from where it was last year. Gregory leaned forward, interested now. You manage the family investments, Derek? Most of them, yes, I said simply. Vanessa focuses on her career, which demands a lot of her time and energy. I handle the financial planning, retirement strategy, college funds for the kids, and our long-term wealth building. Vanessa was speechless, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find the words. My mother looked pleased. My father looked relieved. Ryan was fighting back a grin, and Vanessa, she looked like she'd just been punched in the stomach. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't been cruel or vindictive. I'd simply told the truth, calmly and factually, in a way that was impossible to dispute. The table sat in awkward silence for a moment before Patricia, ever the social chameleon, jumped in with a new topic about an upcoming charity event, but the damage was done. Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative had just cracked, and everyone at that table had seen it happen. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced pleasantries and strained smiles. Vanessa barely spoke to me, instead throwing herself into conversations with her sister and parents, laughing a bit too loud at jokes that weren't that funny. I could see her trying to regain control of the room, to reassert her dominance, but the atmosphere had changed. People were looking at me differently now, not with pity or sympathy, but with a kind of respect I hadn't seen in years. My father caught my eye at one point and gave me a subtle nod of approval. Ryan texted me under the table, "Dude, that was legendary." When the check came, there was an awkward moment. Vanessa reached for it automatically, as she always did at family dinners, but Gregory intercepted it first. "Let me get this one," he said firmly. "Anniversary gift." Vanessa looked like she wanted to protest, but she just nodded, her jaw tight. We said our goodbyes in the restaurant lobby. Hugs were exchanged, promises were made to get together soon, and the kids were tired and ready to go home. Emma held my hand as we walked to the car, and Lucas was already half asleep on my shoulder by the time I buckled him into his car seat. Vanessa got into the passenger seat without a word. She stared straight ahead as I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. The drive home would take about 25 minutes, and I knew this silence wouldn't last. It didn't. We'd barely made it onto the highway when she exploded. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the kids wouldn't hear in the back seat. I kept my eyes on the road. "What was what?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Derek. That whole performance back there. Making me look like an idiot in front of my family." "I didn't make you look like anything," I said calmly. "I just corrected some inaccurate statements." "Inaccurate?" Her voice was rising now. You completely undermined me. You undermined yourself, Vanessa. You stood up and told everyone you run everything, that you handle all the finances, that I'm basically just along for the ride. None of that is true, and you know it. She turned in her seat to face me fully, her eyes blazing. So what, you've been keeping track? Building some kind of case against me? No, I said evenly. I've been doing my job as a husband and a father. I've been managing our finances, planning for our future, and making sure our family is stable. You just never bothered to notice because you were too busy taking credit for everything. That's not fair. Fair. I cut her off, my voice still measured but with an edge now. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that you make major decisions without consulting me? Is it fair that you tell people I contribute nothing to this marriage? Is it fair that you just humiliated me in front of both our families? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. I could see her mind working, trying to find a way to turn this back on me. But she was coming up empty. I never said you contribute nothing, she said finally. Her voice quieter now. You said I'm lucky to have you keeping things organized. You said you're the one who really runs things. You've been saying variations of that for years, Vanessa. At parties, at family gatherings, even in front of the kids. I was joking. It's not a joke when it's constant. It's not a joke when you actually believe it. The car fell silent except for the hum of tires on asphalt. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw that both kids were asleep, Emma's head resting against the window, Lucas clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. When did you get promoted? Vanessa asked after a long pause, her voice small. April 19th, I said. It was a Friday. You were on a video call with your team when I got home around 6:30. I waited until you were done, told you about the promotion and the salary increase, and you said, "That's wonderful, honey. We'll celebrate this weekend." Then you got another call, and that was the end of the conversation. We never celebrated. You never asked about it again. She was quiet, processing this. The salary increase, she said slowly. How much? 32%, I replied. Plus performance bonuses and stock options. I heard her breath catch. 32%? Derek, that's... Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. You just didn't listen. More silence. This time, I could hear something different in it. Not anger. Something closer to realization. Maybe even shame. Where's that money been going? She asked. Into our savings, our retirement accounts, the kids' college funds. Same place my paychecks have always gone. I haven't been hiding it, Vanessa. It's all in our joint accounts. You could have checked at any time. I thought, she started, then stopped. I thought I was the one making more money. I thought I was the primary earner. You were, I said. Until my promotion. Now we're about equal, actually. Your base salary is slightly higher, but with my bonuses, we're roughly the same. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Her entire worldview was shifting, and she was struggling to keep up. The investments, she said. You really manage all of that? Yes, but I set up the accounts. You set up the initial accounts 8 years ago with help from your father's financial advisor. Then you got busy with work and handed it off to me. I've been managing it ever since. Researching funds, rebalancing portfolios, adjusting our risk tolerance as we've gotten older. I send you quarterly reports via email. You've never opened them. I open my emails, not those ones. They're in a folder labeled Financial Updates. I've been sending them for 6 years. You have 72 unread messages in that folder. Dead silence. We were getting close to home now, the familiar streets of our neighborhood coming into view. I slowed down, approaching our house, a beautiful 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn that I maintained every weekend. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Neither of us moved. Why didn't you say something sooner? Vanessa asked quietly. If you've been feeling this way, why didn't you tell me? I turned to look at her for the first time since we'd gotten in the car. Her makeup was slightly smudged, her carefully styled hair coming loose. She looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen in years. I tried, I said simply, so many times. But every time I brought up something that bothered me, you'd shut it down. You'd tell me I was being sensitive, or that I was making a big deal out of nothing, or that you had it under control. Eventually, I stopped trying. Derek, I'm not angry, Vanessa. I'm just done. Done being invisible in my own marriage. Done being treated like an accessory to your life instead of a partner in it. She looked stricken. What does that mean? Are you saying you want a divorce? The question hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what I want anymore. I just know I can't keep living like this. I got out of the car and went to unbuckle Lucas from his car seat. He stirred slightly but didn't wake as I carried him into the house. Vanessa followed with Emma, and we went through the familiar routine of putting the kids to bed, brushing teeth, changing into pajamas, tucking them in. When we were done, we stood in the hallway between their bedrooms. Two people who'd built a life together but somehow become strangers. We need to talk about this, Vanessa said. Really talk. Not just what happened tonight, but everything. I agree, I said. But not tonight. I'm exhausted and I think we both need time to process. She nodded slowly. Tomorrow, then? Tomorrow. We went to our bedroom, changed for bed in silence, and lay down on opposite sides of our king-sized mattress, miles apart, despite being just inches away from each other. I stared at the ceiling, listening to Vanessa's breathing, gradually slow as she fell asleep. But I stayed awake for hours, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that had been said, and everything that was about to change. I woke up to an empty bed. Sunlight was streaming through the curtains, and I could hear movement downstairs. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen. I checked my phone, 8:47 a.m. Monday morning. I'd completely forgotten to set my alarm when I made it downstairs. Still in my pajamas, I found Vanessa at the kitchen table with her laptop open, files spread out in front of her, and a mug of coffee cooling beside her elbow. She looked like she'd been up for hours. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons, still in their pajamas too. Morning, I said cautiously. She looked up, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. I called in sick to work. You should too. I poured myself coffee and sat down across from her. What are you doing? Reading, she said, turning her laptop screen toward me. It was open to our email account, specifically the folder labeled Financial Updates. You were right. I never opened any of these. I sipped my coffee, waiting. I've been reading them all morning, she continued, her voice strained. Every quarterly report you sent, every budget update, every investment summary. Derek, you've been managing everything. I told you that last night. I know, but seeing it... She gestured helplessly at the screen. It's different. I didn't realize how much you were actually doing. I set my mug down. What made you finally look? She laughed bitterly. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you said in the car, about feeling invisible. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time I asked you about your day. Your real day, not just how was work, while I'm scrolling through my phone. February 9th, I said quietly. She blinked. What? February 9th of this year. You asked me about a presentation I was working on. We actually had a conversation about it over dinner. It was the first time in months you'd asked me something specific about work. Her face crumpled slightly. You remember the exact date? I remember because it felt so unusual, and because it never happened again. Vanessa closed her laptop and pushed it aside. I've been a terrible wife. No, Derek, I have been. I've been so focused on my own career, my own achievements, that I completely stopped seeing you as a partner. I turned you into a background character in my own story. I didn't disagree. I couldn't. Tell me what else I've missed, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Because clearly there's a lot. So I did. I told her about Lucas's teacher calling me 3 weeks ago because he'd been having trouble in math class, and how I'd been working with him every evening to help him catch up. She hadn't noticed. I told her about Emma's piano recital coming up next month, and how I'd been taking her to practice sessions every Tuesday and Thursday. She'd forgotten it was happening. I told her about my mother's upcoming knee surgery in December, and how I'd arranged to take time off work to help my father care for her afterward. With each revelation, Vanessa looked more stricken. I'm their mother, she whispered. How did I not know about Lucas struggling in school? I tried to tell you, I said gently. You were on a conference call. You said we'd talk about it later. God, I say that constantly, don't I? We'll talk about it later. Yes, she buried her face in her hands. What kind of person have I become? I reached across the table and touched her arm. You're not a bad person, Vanessa. You're ambitious and driven, and you've accomplished incredible things in your career. But somewhere along the way, you started measuring your worth by how much control you had, how much you could manage on your own. You turned our marriage into a competition you didn't realize you were losing. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. Am I losing you? The question hit harder than I expected. I don't know, I admitted. Right now, I honestly don't know. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Is Mommy crying? Vanessa quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. I'm okay, sweetie. Just having a grown-up conversation with Daddy. Are you getting divorced? Emma asked, her voice small and scared. Vanessa and I exchanged a look of pure panic. Kids hear and understand far more than we give them credit for. Come here, baby, I said, pulling out the chair next to me. Emma climbed up and I wrapped my arm around her. We're not getting divorced. We're just talking about some things we need to work on, like when I have to work on my math. Despite everything, I smiled. Yeah, kind of like that. But you help me with my math, Emma said logically. Who helps you with your marriage math? Vanessa let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's a very good question, Emma. Lucas wandered in then, dragging his dinosaur behind him. Can we have pancakes? The mundane request broke the tension. Vanessa stood up. Yes, I'll make them. You sure? I asked. Vanessa hadn't made breakfast in probably 2 years. She was always rushing out the door for early meetings. I'm sure, she said firmly. I called in sick, remember? I'm here all day. I got the kids settled back in the living room while Vanessa rummaged through the kitchen, clearly trying to remember where everything was kept. I found her staring into the pantry with a confused expression, looking for something. Where's the pancake mix? We don't use mix. I make them from scratch. The recipe is in the blue notebook by the coffee maker. She found the notebook and flipped it open, her eyes widening. You have recipes in here, lots of them. I've been doing most of the cooking for the past 3 years. 3 years, she repeated softly. Derek, what have I been doing for 3 years? Working, I said honestly. Building your career, which is important, and I've never resented that. But you let it consume everything else. She started pulling out ingredients, flour, eggs, milk. Teach me. What? Teach me how to make pancakes from scratch. I want to learn, so I did. We stood side by side at the counter, and I walked her through the process. Measuring flour, whisking eggs, testing the griddle temperature. She was nervous, second-guessing herself, asking if she was doing it right. It was oddly intimate, this simple act of cooking together. Not too much batter, I said as she poured onto the griddle. About 1/4 cup per pancake. Like this? Perfect. The first batch came out a little unevenly cooked, but the kids didn't care. They devoured them with maple syrup and declared them delicious. Vanessa watched them eat with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between pride and heartbreak. After breakfast, the kids went outside to play in the backyard, and Vanessa and I cleaned up together. Loading the dishwasher, wiping down counters, working in sync like we used to years ago. I want to fix this, Vanessa said suddenly, her hands still in the soapy water. Our marriage. I don't know how, but I want to try. It's not going to be easy, I warned her. This isn't something that changes overnight. You've spent years building these patterns, and breaking them will take real work. I know, she said, but I'm willing to do the work. Are you? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Did I still love Vanessa? Yes. Did I believe she could change? I wasn't sure, but did I want to try? Yes, I said finally. But we need ground rules. Real ones. Okay, like what? I dried my hands and faced her fully. First, we make decisions together, both of us. No more unilateral choices about money, the kids, or our life. We're partners and we act like it. Agreed. Second, you need to actually be present. Not just physically here, but mentally and emotionally present. When the kids talk to you, you listen. When I tell you something, you remember it. No more we'll talk later, unless we actually do talk later. She nodded, her expression serious. What else? Third, we go to counseling together because we need help navigating this. And I don't think we can do it alone. I'll find someone this week, she promised. And fourth, I said, the hardest one, you need to figure out who you are outside of work. Because right now, your entire identity is wrapped up in being VP of marketing, in being successful and in control. And until you find balance, we can't have balance. She was quiet for a long moment. That's going to be the hardest one. I know, but I'll try. I promise I'll try. We stood there in our kitchen, two people who'd almost lost each other, but were choosing to fight for what they'd built. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was just real, and for the first time in years, it felt like we were actually on the same team. 3 months later, I was sitting in Dr. Sarah Chen's office for what had become our weekly Tuesday evening appointment. Vanessa sat beside me on the grey couch, her hand resting near mine, but not quite touching. We'd come a long way, but some distances take time to close completely. So, Dr. Chen said, setting down her notepad and leaning back in her chair. Tell me about your week. Vanessa glanced at me, then spoke. We had a disagreement on Wednesday. Emma wanted to join the travel soccer team, and it would mean a significant time commitment. Practices 3 times a week, weekend tournaments. We had different opinions on whether it was too much. What did you do? Dr. Chen asked. We talked about it, I said. Actually talked. Sat down after the kids went to bed, looked at our calendars, discussed the financial cost, considered Emma's other activities. It took us about an hour, but we made a decision together. And what was the decision? Vanessa smiled slightly. We're letting her try it for 1 season. If it becomes too overwhelming for her or for our family schedule, we'll reassess after that. Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. That's excellent. 3 months ago, how would that situation have played out? Vanessa's smile faded. I would have made the decision without asking Derek. Probably would have signed her up, told him about it afterward, and expected him to just make it work with his schedule. And you, Derek? How would you have responded? I would have been frustrated, but wouldn't have said anything. Would have just adjusted my schedule and resented it quietly. But this time we acted like partners, Vanessa said. Like we're supposed to. The therapy sessions had been intense. Dr. Chen didn't let us hide behind pleasantries or avoid difficult conversations. In our first session, she'd asked Vanessa point blank why she felt the need to control everything, and Vanessa had broken down completely. It turned out that control was Vanessa's response to fear. Fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of being seen as weak. Her father had raised her with impossible standards. Nothing was ever quite good enough. Every achievement was met with, but you could do better. So she'd spent her entire adult life trying to prove she was capable, competent, and in control of everything around her. The problem was, you can't control a marriage. You can't control another person. And the harder she'd tried to control our relationship, the more she'd pushed me away. For my part, Dr. Chen had challenged me on my own patterns. My tendency to avoid conflict, to stay silent rather than speak up, had enabled Vanessa's behavior. I'd made myself smaller and smaller, thinking it would keep the peace, but instead it had just made me invisible. We both had work to do, and we were doing it. The changes weren't always smooth. There were backslides and arguments. 2 weeks after our anniversary dinner, Vanessa had made a major purchase decision without consulting me, upgrading her company car, and when I'd confronted her about it, she'd initially gotten defensive. But then she'd stopped herself, taken a breath, and admitted she'd fallen back into old habits. She'd returned the car, and we'd discussed it properly before making a joint decision. Small victories. Work had been another major adjustment. Vanessa had been forced to confront the fact that her job was consuming her life. After several difficult conversations with her boss and some soul-searching, she'd made changes. She stopped checking email after 7 p.m. She declined projects that would require extensive travel. She even turned down a promotion that would have meant longer hours and more responsibility. That last one had shocked me. The old Vanessa would never have turned down a promotion. It's not worth it, she told me the night she made the decision. Not if it means missing more of our kids' lives. Not if it means losing you. She'd started coming to Emma's piano practices, learning alongside our daughter. She'd begun helping Lucas with his math homework, though she had to admit she was rustier at fourth-grade math than she'd expected. She'd started cooking dinner at least 3 nights a week, using the recipe notebook I'd built up over the years, and slowly, gradually, she was becoming present in her own life again. But perhaps the biggest change came from an unexpected source. One Saturday morning in late December, Vanessa's father, Gregory, called and asked if he could stop by. He showed up an hour later looking uncomfortable in a way I'd never seen before. "I owe you an apology," he said to me, standing in our living room. I was so surprised I almost dropped my coffee mug. "I'm sorry? Your brother Ryan called me last week," Gregory continued. "He told me some things about how Vanessa and I have treated you over the years. And he was right. I've been dismissive of you, condescending even. I made assumptions about who you were, based on the fact that you weren't as flashy as what I expected for my daughter." Vanessa appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. Gregory turned to include her in the conversation. "I raised you to be strong and independent, Vanessa, but I think I went too far. I taught you that needing help was weakness, that relying on anyone else meant you'd failed. And watching you nearly destroy your marriage because of those lessons has been a wake-up call." "Dad," Vanessa started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. Derek, you're a good man. You're a present father, a dedicated husband, and from what Ryan tells me, you're damn good at your job. You've been holding this family together while my daughter took all the credit, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't know what to say. In 12 years of marriage, Gregory had never apologized to me for anything. "Your mother and I would like to take you all out to dinner," he continued. "A do-over of that anniversary disaster. Let me do this right." We went to dinner with Vanessa's parents the following week. It was different this time. Gregory asked me about work, actually listening to my answers. But Tricia asked about the kids, specific questions that showed she'd been paying attention. And when Vanessa started to dominate the conversation, her mother gently redirected, making space for everyone to participate. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. My own family had been supportive throughout everything. My mother had pulled me aside at Thanksgiving and told me how proud she was that I'd finally stood up for myself. Ryan had become my unofficial therapist, listening when I needed to vent, offering advice when I asked for it. "I always knew you had it in you," he'd said. "You just needed the right push." Christmas came and went. We spent it quietly at home, just the 4 of us. Emma was thrilled with her new soccer gear, Lucas with his dinosaur encyclopedia. Vanessa had taken the entire week off from work, the first time she'd done that in years, and we'd spent the time actually being a family. Movie nights, board games, building a snowman in the backyard that Lucas insisted needed to be a dinosaur instead. It was simple. It was ordinary. It was everything. Now, sitting in Dr. Chen's office in early January, we were reflecting on how far we'd come. "I want to talk about trust," Dr. Chen said. "Derek, do you trust Vanessa?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm learning to trust her again. It's not automatic like it used to be, but it's rebuilding. What would help strengthen that trust?" "Consistency," I said. "She's made a lot of changes, and they've been real. But I need to see that they stick, that this isn't just a temporary fix that will fade once things get comfortable again." Dr. Chen turned to Vanessa. "How does that land with you?" "It's fair," Vanessa said quietly. "I broke his trust. It's my job to rebuild it, and that takes time. I can't expect him to just forget years of hurt because I've been better for a few months." "And do you trust yourself?" Dr. Chen asked her. "To maintain these changes?" Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. "Most days, yes. But there are days when I feel myself slipping back into old patterns. When work gets stressful, I want to just take control of everything because it feels safer. Those are the hard days. What do you do on those days?" "I talk to Derek. I tell him I'm struggling, and we work through it together." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's exactly what you should be doing. Partnership isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest when you're not. As we left the session and walked to our car, Vanessa reached for my hand. I took it, our fingers intertwining naturally. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?"
For not giving up on us.
"You could have. After that dinner, after everything I put you through, you could have just walked away. But you didn't." I squeezed her hand. "I didn't want to walk away. I just needed you to see me." "I see you now," she said, stopping and turning to face me under the parking lot lights. "I see how much you do, how much you've always done. I see the man I fell in love with, and I'm sorry it took me so long to remember to look." We stood there, in the cold January air, two people who'd almost lost everything but were choosing to fight for it instead. It wasn't the fairy tale ending. We still had work to do, challenges to face, old habits to break. But it was real, and it was ours. When we got home, Lucas was already in bed, but Emma was waiting up, supposedly doing homework, but really just wanting to see us. "How was Dr. Chen?" she asked, too perceptive for her own good. "Good," Vanessa said, sitting down next to her at the kitchen table. "We're doing better." "Good," Emma said solemnly. "Because I like it better when you're both happy." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Me too, baby. Me too." Later that night, after Emma was in bed and the house was quiet, Vanessa and I sat together on the couch. Not on our phones, not watching TV, just sitting together. "I was thinking," Vanessa said, "about what you said that night, about not knowing what you wanted anymore." "I remember. Do you know now?" I looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman I'd married 12 years ago, who'd gotten lost somewhere along the way, but was finding her way back. At the mother who was learning to be present with her children. At the partner who was learning to share control instead of seizing it. "Yeah," I said. "I know now. And what is it you want?" "This," I said simply. "This version of us, where we're actually partners, where we see each other, where we both matter." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I want that too." We sat there in comfortable silence, and I thought about that anniversary dinner 3 months ago. About how humiliated I'd felt, how angry, how done. About how I'd finally reached my breaking point and decided to show everyone the truth. The truth was, I wasn't the passive, incompetent husband Vanessa had made me out to be. I was a man who'd been holding his family together while his wife took all the credit. I was a father who showed up, a professional who excelled at his job, a partner who'd tried his best, even when it went unnoticed. And the truth was, Vanessa wasn't the villain in this story. She was a woman who'd been taught that her worth depended on control, who'd let fear drive her decisions, who'd lost sight of what really mattered. But she was also someone capable of change, of growth, of becoming the partner she'd promised to be all those years ago. The dinner had been the catalyst, the moment everything changed. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where we both had to work, both had to change, both had to show up fully. Marriage isn't about one person controlling everything, or one person sacrificing everything. It's about two people choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That night at the anniversary dinner, I'd quietly shown everyone the truth. But the more important truth, the one I was still learning, was that a marriage isn't won or lost in a single moment. It's built in the small, everyday choices, in pancakes made together on a Monday morning, in decisions discussed instead of dictated, in hands held across therapy office parking lots, in moments of quiet comfort on the couch after the kids are asleep. 3 months after that dinner, we weren't perfect. We were still learning, still growing, still figuring out how to be partners instead of opponents. But we were doing it together, and that made all the difference. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs with Vanessa, I thought about the question she'd asked at dinner that night. The one about whether I wanted a divorce. I knew my answer now. No, I didn't want a divorce. I wanted exactly what we were building, a real partnership, a genuine connection, a marriage where both people mattered equally. It had taken hitting rock bottom to get here. It had taken public humiliation and difficult conversations and months of hard work. But it had been worth it, because for the first time in years, When I looked at Vanessa, I didn't see the woman who'd made me feel invisible. I saw my wife, and she finally saw me too. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.